Good morning. Welcome to the Subcommittee on K-12 Higher Education and CIP. And we'll go ahead and have the Secretary call the roll, and thank you all for your patience.
Assemblywoman Howdigi? Here. Assemblywoman Kasama? Here. Assemblyman Miller? Here. Assemblywoman Monroe-Monreno? Assemblyman O'Neill? Here. Assemblywoman Peters? Here. Assemblyman Yeager? Here. Senator Cannizzaro? Here. Senator Neal? Here. Senator Severs-Gansert? Here. Senator Titus? Here. Assemblywoman Backus? Present. Chair Don Daraloop.
Here. Thank you very much, and please mark those not here yet present when they arrive. And with that, just a reminder to turn off your cell phones, et cetera, et cetera. Please leave your business card with the secretaries if you are going to speak. And today we will be closing the bond interest and redemption budget within the Treasurer's Office, the Executive Branch Capital Improvement Program, the Conservation and Natural Resource Bond Programs, and the Legislative Branch Capital Improvement Program. And with that being said, we'll begin with the bond interest and redemption budget, and Ms. Waller will take the subcommittee through the closing document for this budget, which begins on page 3. For those in the audience, a printed copy is available, and it is also online. And Ms. Waller, please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee members. Julie Waller from the Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. And as the chair indicated, the first budget for the subcommittee's consideration is the Bond Interest and Redemption Fund. This budget provides the funding necessary to pay the principal and interest on the debt instruments issued by the state of Nevada. This budget was heard back in February, and there are no major closing issues. You'll note in the middle of page 3 there is one other closing item, a base budget technical adjustment. The governor's budget includes property tax revenues generated by the 17-cent tax rate for each year of the 23-25 biennium of $162.3 million in each fiscal year. This represents no change compared to the base year's actuals of collected in FY22. Fiscal staff has worked with the Treasurer's Office to reflect the property tax estimates for the 23-25 biennium based on updated revenue projections, and as such, a technical adjustment is recommended to increase the property tax revenue by $56.6 million in fiscal year 24 and $63.2 million in fiscal year 2025, bringing the total estimated property tax revenue to $218.9 million and $225.5 million respectively. And this is reflected in the adjustments in revenue to revenue and expenditures table on the last page of the closing document. I would note that this technical adjustment presented does not have any impact on the identified affordability to issue general obligation bonds in the upcoming biennium. A second technical adjustment, if the subcommittee approves, would be made to align this budget with the decision made by the Public Safety, Natural Resource, and Transportation Joint Subcommittee on May 2nd, which recommended approval of funding the State Infrastructure Bank one more biennium with the unobligated reserved interest earnings transferred from this budget to the State Infrastructure Bank, totaling $525,463 over the biennium. Fiscal staff recommends these other closing items be closed as a technical adjustment and requests authority for staff to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you very much, and I would accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to approve this recommended item as stated by fiscal staff.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Backus, and second from Senator Cannizzaro. Any discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you very much. Motion passes. We'll move on. Thank you, Ms. Waller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next closing item will be the Capital Improvement Program found in your closing packet, beginning on page 7. I'd like to take a moment just to share with the subcommittee what is included in this closing packet and how these documents will be used through the closing process. The closing packet includes narrative for the various capital improvement program projects recommended by the governor and as revised by budget amendments. Specific descriptions of the construction projects are included, as well as summaries of the maintenance, planning, and statewide projects. Also in your packet, you'll notice that there are several attachments. The first attachment is a table, and this table identifies the funding sources of each project, each type of project, as well as a brief narrative of what that project does, as well as the funding sources recommended and proposed through the revisions of the budget amendments. Attachment 1 is found, the separate table. Attachment 2 is found on page 37. And this is a comparison table of the total funding recommended by the governor in the executive budget, as well as a summary of the funding recommended, inclusive of the budget amendments submitted by the governor's finance office through May 4th. As you can see through this table, the capital improvement program total has changed from $1.226 billion to a recommended $1.202 billion. That's a difference, a reduction of about $24.2 million. There is a change of the reallocated bond proceeds, a reduction of $25 million. General fund has increased, is recommended to increase by $96.3 million. And the issuance of general obligation bonds has decreased by $73.4 million. Additionally, the budget amendments recommend changing the initially recommended highway funds to support highway fund projects of $122.8 million to general obligation bonds of the same amount to be repaid with highway fund, the debt repaid with highway fund. And then lastly, the other funding sources, the annual slot tax has been reduced or is recommended to be reduced by $12 million. Federal funds be reduced by $10.1 million, resulting in that combined change of a reduction of $24.2 million. I would also note that the governor's recommended CIP originally included 98 projects, and with the budget amendments, 2 budget amendments that have been submitted, that number has increased to 99 projects. And with that, I'll walk the committee through, the subcommittee through the high-level summary of these changes. As you can see in the middle of page 7, I walked the subcommittee through these funding source changes already. I believe I've hit all of the bullet points here, so I won't walk you through that again. I would note that at the bottom of page 7, through the budget amendments that were received on April 3rd and April 30th to the governor's recommended 2023 CIP, 5 projects are recommended to be added, and those are listed on the bottom of page 7, and that includes 23C34 Silver Springs Conservation Camp demolition of $3.0 million, 23C35, a purchase of 18 state office buildings in Las Vegas for a total cost of $213.9 million, the addition of project 23C36, purchased building improvements in Las Vegas, and that's $74.5 million. The addition of project 23C37, that's a building purchase and improvements in Carson City at $24.5 million. And project 23P10, that's an advanced planning state office building at the Capitol Complex here in Carson City for $10.8 million. The combined total of these 5 projects is $326.7 million. The top of page 8, subcommittee will notice that the budget amendments also recommend the withdrawal of 4 projects initially included in the governor's recommended capital improvement program. Those projects include 23C05, the Southern Nevada Fleet Services Maintenance Building at the Grant Sawyer site, project 23C18, the construction of parking expansion of the Grant Sawyer office building site, that was $1.8 million. Project C28, the administration building planned for the Sahara complex. That was a cost of $150.5 million. and Project 23C35, State Office Building Grant Sawyer Office Site at $186.3 million. The recommended withdrawal of these projects would result in a net reduction of $350.9 million. Additionally, in the middle of page 8, the State Public Works Division has identified 4 projects within the Governor's recommended 23 CIP that have a useful life of less than 20 years, which were originally recommended to be funded with highway fund appropriations. However, the budget amendment submitted on April 3rd recommends these projects now be funded with general obligation bonds to be repaid from the highway fund. I would note that in recent biennia, the CIP legislation has generally allocated general fund or highway fund appropriations or funding sources other than general obligation bonds to support projects with a useful life of less than 20 years. And as we walk through each of these projects, decision points will be provided for the subcommittee to consider funding options for these programs. So the 4 projects that fall into this group are 23C10, construct secure parking DMV Flamingo, warehouse air conditioning upgrade at the DMV Flamingo, the replacement of surveillance cameras and equipment at the DMV Flamingo, as well as statewide paving program. So these 4 projects total approximately $5.5 million. In addition, the next item is the request for project extensions for 2019 and 2021 CIP projects. The State Public Works Division has identified 12 projects approved during the 2019 session and 1 project approved during the 2021 session for which agency is requesting a project extension during this session. Reasonable extension requests include delays in project completion, dependencies on outside entities, time to complete the warranty period, and other unforeseen circumstances. The projects are identified specifically here in the bolted list, and all 2019 project extensions appear reasonable to staff. I would note that CIP Project 21C03, which is for the Washoe County Training Center addition for the Nevada Army National Guard, is not set to expire at the end of the current biennium and is currently authorized through the end of fiscal year 2025. Generally speaking, the project extensions are requested for projects whose funding is set to expire after the 4-year period. So the 21 project, that project funding will not expire to the end of FY25. So it is a unique circumstance to request a project extension for a project that currently has authorized funding. I would note that fiscal staff received updated information from the State Public Works Division that indicated that this not extending this project may jeopardize the ability to enter into the contract and could potentially jeopardize the federal funding for this project to be forfeited. And so while it's not historically intended that a project is extended for a project that is currently active, however, not extending this project, as mentioned, could jeopardize the project itself. So given this unique circumstance, the subcommittee may wish to consider an exception to past practice and approve this extension so as not to jeopardize this project. Moving on to the decision for the subcommittee. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend that fiscal staff include back language in the CIP legislation that would approve the 2-year project extensions requested by the State Public Works Division for the identified 12 projects that were approved in the 2019 Capital Improvement Program? And does the subcommittee wish to recommend that fiscal staff include back language in the CIP legislation that would approve the 2-year project extensions requested by the State Public Works Division for CIP Project 21C03 that was approved in the 2021 Capital Improvement Program?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move to recommend that fiscal staff include back language in the CIP legislation to approve the 2-year extensions for the 12 projects approved in the 2019 Capital Improvement Program, as well as the 2021 Capital Improvement Program.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Backus, and a second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this issue? Thank you. Oh, Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just had a question on one of the budget items on page number 7 and the bullet points where the Silver Springs Conservation Camp demo was going to cost $3 million to demolish. It's in my district. It's an issue that we've had for a decade, as long as, if not longer, on that properties, with a lot of people coming to me on different uses of that and wondering about that $3 million cost when in a previous budget hearing on the state public lands, they were taking down 2 buildings, 2 firehouses, and that cost was going to be $728,000 for removing 2 buildings and a lot of other stuff on these fire districts. But we're spending $3 million knocking down this thing in Silver Springs, and so I just need more information on that. And no one's reached out to me. Well, this was part of that.
No, this was a summary page.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right.
This is only a project extension.
Okay, so Wayne has said this will come up later for a vote, and so I will re-ask my question then. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator. And with that being said, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes, and we'll move on. Thank you, Ms. Waller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And now we'll turn to the construction projects that are recommended in the Governor's 2023 CIP program. The first project for consideration is Project 23C01, Mail Services Building, Carson City. The Governor recommends total funding of $16.7 million, consisting of $2.2 million in general fund appropriations, $14.5 million in state general obligation bonds, to design and construct a 13,500 square foot mail services building on the Capitol complex. The building would include a mailroom, administrative offices, reception area, support spaces, and a loading dock. If this project is approved, the division anticipates construction would begin in January 2025, with the facility being completed and open for use in December of 2026. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C01 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend approval of the Governor's recommendation for CIP Project 23-C01 as reflected in the closing documents.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Backus, and a second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Ms. Waller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project for consideration is 23C02, Department of Motor Vehicles Silverado Ranch Facility in Las Vegas. The Governor's originally recommended highway fund appropriations of $105.9 million to construct a new full-service DMV facility, including commercial driver's license services, on Silver Ranch Boulevard and Valley View Boulevard in Las Vegas. This project is a continuation of CIP Project 21 P06, which funded the design through construction documents for the new facility. The building is estimated to provide 73,488 square feet and would include customer service stations, classrooms, testing spaces, offices, emission stations, and waiting areas. The project description also indicates the site improvements are expected to include a parking lot, inspection canopy, motorcycle and CDL testing tracks, and required off-site street improvements. If this project is approved, the agency indicates construction is anticipated to commence July 2024, with the facility open and for intended use in July 2026. I would note that during the February 16, 2023 budget hearing, the subcommittee inquired why this project is recommended to be funded entirely with highway fund appropriations of $105.9 million, as opposed to being funded through the issuance of highway fund general obligation bonds, similar to the manner in which the construction of the newest DMV facilities in South Reno and Las Vegas were approved to be funded. On April 3rd, 2023, the Governor's Finance Office submitted a budget amendment recommending the $105.9 million in highway fund appropriations originally recommended to finance this project be replaced with highway general obligation bonds to be repaid, with the debt to be repaid from the highway fund. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23CO2 funded with $105.9 million in general obligation bonds to be repaid from the Highway Fund as recommended in the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C02 as funded by the governor's amended recommendation.
Thank you very much. Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller again for the record. The next project is 23C03, seismic retrofit and renovation, Heroes Memorial and Annex in Carson City. The governor recommends $29.9 million in general fund appropriations to construct the seismic strengthening and major renovation of the Heroes Memorial Building and Annex. This project would provide significant upgrades to the structure and building systems and provide more effective use of available spaces. The Heroes Memorial and Annex are historic buildings located on the Capitol complex and are part of the Attorney General's office building complex. This project would be a continuation of CIP Project 21P02, Advanced Planning Seismic Retrofit and Renovation, Heroes Memorial Building and Annex, which funded the design through construction documents. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C03 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much. I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend approval of CIP Project 23-C03 as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much. Second, Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Seeing none, motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. The next project is 23C04, remodel Army Aviation Support Facility Administration Building at the Harry Reid Training Center. The governor recommends total funding of $3.4 million, consisting of $1.5 million in general fund appropriations and $1.9 million in federal funds, to remodel existing interior spaces to meet the mission of the Army Aviation Support Facility, construct and remodel women's locker rooms to meet the needs of increased female staff, and update architectural finishes throughout a portion of the facility. If this project is approved, the State Public Works Division anticipates design would begin in October 2023, construction would start in October 2024, and the facility would be completed and open for use in May 2025. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C04 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much. I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. The next project is 23C05, Southern Nevada Fleet Service Maintenance Building at the Grant Sawyer site. The governor originally recommended $12.3 million in general fund appropriations to construct this facility on the site of the Grant Sawyer office building. However, the Department of Administration determined that the purchase of existing office buildings and parking garage in Las Vegas would be more cost-effective than the initial proposal to construct 2 office buildings and to construct 2 other projects at the Grant Sawyer office building site in Las Vegas, inclusive of this project, 23C05. On April 3rd, the Governor's Finance Office submitted a budget amendment to the Fiscal Analysis Division recommending this construction project be withdrawn as it is no longer necessary due to the recommendation to add CIP Project 23C35, which is the purchase of state office buildings in Las Vegas. Does the subcommittee wish to not recommend approval of CIP Project 23C05 as recommended in the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to not recommend approval of the CIP project as recommended by the governor's budget amendment.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and second by Senator Canizaro. Any questions or discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project for consideration is 23C06, the remodel and addition of Southern Nevada State Veterans Home. The governor recommends total funding of $99.8 million, consisting of $64 million in federal funds and $35.8 million in state general obligation bonds to support the continuation of CIP Project 21P03, advanced planning, remodel, and addition of the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home. This project would remodel and construct an addition to the Southern Nevada State Veterans Home located in Boulder City. The proposed remodeling would consist of 86,280 square feet of existing space and would include a new addition of resident rooms. The State Public Works Division anticipates construction will be phased and commence in August of 2024, with the facility being completed in May of 2026. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C06 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project for consideration is 23C07, Department of Motor Vehicles, Carson Office Customer Counter Renovation and Self-Service Kiosk Installation. The governor recommends highway fund appropriations of $2.7 million to design and construct updated ADA-compliant millwork consisting of customer counters and information desks with staff to public security barriers. The project would also design and construct an exterior built-in self-service 24-hour kiosk. On April 3rd, the Governor's Finance Office submitted a budget amendment recommending the $2.7 million in highway fund appropriations originally recommended to finance this project be replaced with general obligation bonds to be repaid from the highway fund. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C07, funded with $2.7 million in general obligation bonds to be repaid from the highway fund as recommended in the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much. I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended in the governor's budget amendment.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus. Second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller again for the record. The next project for consideration is 23C08, the Residence Fire Station Demolition, Spring Creek Fire Station. The governor recommends total funding of $728,199, consisting of $621,074 in state funds and $107,125 in agency funds for the demolition of two former abandoned fire station sites, limited site restoration, and development of seasonal parking. The recommended project would demolish and remove all structures at the first site and all structures except for the garage at the second site. Additionally, parking sites with RV hookups would be established for seasonal staff of the Division of Forestry at the second site. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C08 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of the CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and a second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion? Thank you very much. With that, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. The next project, 23C09, Ground Support Equipment Shop, Harry Reid Training Center. The governor recommends $2 million in general fund appropriations to construct a 3,201 square foot ground support equipment shop, including 320 square feet of heated interior space for maintenance for the Army Aviation Support Facility at the Harry Reid Training Center located in Stead. The agency indicates the current facility does not have adequate space to store equipment, and as a result, equipment is stored outside in a small makeshift storage room under an awning attached to a maintenance hangar, which exposes the equipment to the elements. If approved, the State Public Works Division anticipates the project design would begin in October 2023 and construction would start in May 2025, with the facility being completed and open for use in November of 2025. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C09 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of the CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second by Senator Canizaro. And is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're now at Project 23C10, construct secure parking at DMV Flamingo in Las Vegas. The governor recommends highway fund appropriations of $922,033 to design and construct a secure parking area for state-owned vehicles with security fencing, paved parking pad, and secure badge access gate with 3 electrical vehicle charging stations and improved lighting at the DMV Flamingo facility in Las Vegas. The parking area is anticipated to accommodate approximately 20 vehicles. The budget amendment received on April 3rd recommends the addition of $922,033 in general obligation bonds to be repaid from the Highway Fund, with a corresponding decrease in Highway Fund appropriations to support the costs of CIP Project 23C10. As the anticipated useful life of the CIP Project 23C10 does not meet the estimated useful life threshold, consideration could be given to fund the CIP project with Highway Fund appropriations rather than general obligation bonds to be repaid from the Highway Fund as recommended in the budget amendment. The decision for the subcommittee is, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C10 funded with Highway Fund appropriations as originally recommended by the governor, or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C10 funded with general obligation bonds to be repaid from the Highway Fund as recommended in the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much. I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project funded with Highway Fund appropriations as originally recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much. Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. Next project is 23C11, the physical training facilities at Floyd's Edsdal Training Center. The governor recommends $3.9 million in general fund appropriations to construct a physical training area, including a running track, lights for nighttime training, restroom facilities, and utilities at the Floyd Edsdal Training Center in North Las Vegas. If approved, the State Public Works Division anticipates the project design would begin in October 2023, construction would begin April 2025, and the facility would be completed and open for use in March of 2026. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C11 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is 23C12, remodel freight barn, East Ely Railroad Museum in Ely. The governor recommends $7.7 million in general fund appropriations to remodel the freight barn building at the East Ely Railroad Museum into a year-round event center. Improvements to the building would include a fire sprinkler system, building insulation, HVAC modifications, and structural and architectural modifications. If approved, the division anticipates construction would commence in April 2024, with the facility being completed and open for use in March of 2025. I would like to discuss the funding of this project, and for background, I would note that through the passage of Assembly Bill 84, the 2019 legislature authorized the future issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $217.5 million to protect and preserve and obtain the benefits of property and natural and cultural resources of the state. The Department of Conservation and Natural Resources is responsible for administering this conservation bond program. Of this total, $30 million in bond authority is directed to be allocated to the Division of Museums and History for various purposes, including without limitation, the rehabilitation and improvement of the East Ely Depot Museum, and the expansion of the Boulder City Railroad Museum. The 2021 legislature authorized the issuance of general obligation bonds totaling $3 million for the advanced planning and design of the expansion of the Boulder City Railroad Museum and the planning and the design of the rehabilitation and improvement of the East Ely Freight Barn, leaving $27 million of remaining bond authority for the division for future projects. For the 2023 CIP, the governor recommends state general obligation bonds totaling $23.3 million under Conservation Bonds Program for the expansion of the Nevada State Railroad Museum in Boulder City. Well, that's CIP Project 23C20. Given the remaining bond authority of $3.7 million earmarked for the Division of Museums and History projects, the subcommittee could consider applying the remaining $3.7 million in bond authority to the East Ely Freight Barn project, which would result in total funding of $3.7 million in state general obligation bonds and $4 million in general fund appropriations for Project 23C12, and would result in a general fund savings of $3.7 million. With this consideration, the full $30 million in bond authority under the Conservation Bond Program authorized for the Division of Museums and History would be allocated. Therefore, the decision for the subcommittee would be, does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C12, funded with $4 million in general fund appropriations and $3.7 million in general obligation bond authority as authorized in AB 84, approved by the 2019 legislature, which would result in general fund savings of $3.7 million, or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C12, funded with $7.7 million in general fund appropriations as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of the CIP project by funding it with $4 million in general fund appropriations and $3.7 million in general obligation bond authority as authorized in AB 84, which would result in general fund savings of $3.7 million.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Baca, second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes, and we'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. The next project, 23C13, the Committal Building, Northern Nevada Veterans Cemetery. The governor recommends $3.5 million in general fund appropriations to design and construct a committal building at the Northern Nevada Veterans Memorial Cemetery. The 2180 square foot committal building would include restroom storage and an adjacent parking lot. The Northern Nevada Veterans Memorial Cemetery is located in Fernley, Nevada. The State Public Works Division anticipates the design of the project would begin in October 2023 with final design delivered by October 2024. Project construction would commence in November 2024 with the facility being completed and open for use in April of 2025. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C13 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Move to recommend approval of the CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this motion? Thank you very much. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is 23C14, Communications Room Expansion, Southern Desert Correctional Center in Las Vegas. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $1 million to expand and upgrade the communications room from 120 square feet to 350 square feet for technology expansion in the central control building at the Southern Desert Correctional Center in Indian Springs. An HVAC unit would also be included to climate control the space. If this project is approved, the division anticipates construction would commence in July 2023, with the facility being completed and open for use in February 2025. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C14 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Move to recommend approval of the CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Baca, second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're about halfway done here. CIP Project C15, Basement Tenant Improvement, Nevada State Library and Archives. The governor recommends $4.3 million in state funding to design and construct a tenant improvement project for the basement at the Nevada State Library and Archives building. The project would replace mechanical engineering components, installation at perimeter walls, replace interior, select exterior lighting, replace carpeting, and repair and remove concrete steps. According to the justification, the unoccupied space at the library basement would be utilized for additional office space to allow state offices to be in close proximity to the Capitol. State Public Works Division further states the design of the project would begin October 2023, with the final design anticipated to be delivered by May of 2024. Construction would commence in October 2024, with the facility anticipated to be completed and available for use May of 2025. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C15 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Move to recommend approval of the CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus. Second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is C16, Office Renovation, Department of Education Building, Carson City. The governor recommends $2.2 million in general fund appropriations to design and construct a renovation of 2,470 square feet of storage space, part of the main building, into an open office space area at the Department of Education Building in Carson City. The interior portion of the project would convert interior lighting to LED fixtures, HVAC modifications, and life safety system upgrades. The project would install windows at the office renovation and include a restroom renovation. The division indicates the proposed open office space would accommodate 12 additional employees. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C16 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of the CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus. Second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. Project C17, the microwave tower relocation, Grant Sawyer office building in Las Vegas. The governor recommends $4.3 million in general fund appropriations to design and construct the relocation of the existing microwave tower and system in advance of the remodeling of various projects at the Grant Sawyer site. The relocated microwave system would be built on state land located at the Nevada Department of Transportation site on Washington Avenue in Las Vegas. Fiscal staff would note that given the recommendation to withdraw the projects for the remodeling or the construction projects at the Grant Sawyer site, fiscal staff confirmed with the agency that this project would still be needed depending on the outcome of the future outcome of the Grant Sawyer site. The agency indicates these microwave system is vital for maintaining communication and does need to be relocated. If this project is approved, the division anticipates construction would begin April 2024 and be completed April 2025.
Thank you very
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of this project 23C17 as recommended on the closing document?
That's what happens when you read ahead in your book. I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of the CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus. And a second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. CIP Project 23C18 is construct parking expansion, Grant Sawyer office building site in Las Vegas. Governor originally recommended $1.8 million in general fund appropriations to design and construct a surface parking lot expansion at the to accommodate occupants and visitors during and after the construction of the administration building plan for this site. That in CIP Project 23C29. However, on April 3rd, the budget amendment submitted by the Governor's Finance Office recommends the withdrawal of this construction project as is no longer necessary due to the recommendation to add CIP Project 23C35, which is the purchase of state office buildings in Las Vegas. Therefore, does the subcommittee wish to not recommend approval of CIP Project 23C18 as recommended in the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document.
Thank you very much, and I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to not recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended by the governor's budget amendment.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and a second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is 23C19, demolition of cottages, Northern Nevada Children's Home. The governor recommends $1.4 million in state fund and state general fund appropriations to design and demolish all buildings except for the historic gymnasium on the site of the former Northern Nevada Children's Home near the intersection of 5th Street and Stewart Street in Carson City. The buildings contain asbestos siding, roofing, acoustic ceilings, and floorings that will be removed prior to the demolition. The division indicates the design of the projects anticipated to begin October 2023, with the final design anticipated to be delivered by May 2024. Demolition and landscaping remediation would begin August 2024, with project completion anticipated by November 2024. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C19 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much. I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. CIP Project 23C20 is for a visitor center at the Nevada State Railroad Museum in Boulder City. The governor recommends $23.3 million in state general obligation bonds under the Conservation Bond Program authorized through the passage of Assembly Bill 84, passed in the 2019 legislative session, to construct a 9,700 square foot visitor center, orientation plaza, train loading platforms, and parking for the State Railroad Museum in Boulder City. The facility would be located at the southeasterly end of the Boulder City Railroad Museum Railroad Complex. If this project is approved, the division anticipates construction would begin in September of 2024, and the facility would be completed and open for use in November of 2025. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C20 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much. And with that, I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much. And that Assemblywoman Bacchus, the second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is 23C22, Marlette Dam Rehabilitation, Marlette Lake Water System. The governor recommends funding of $10.4 million consisting of $542,319 in federal funds and $9.9 million in state funds to provide additional funding necessary to complete the Marlette Dam Rehabilitation Project approved and started in CIP Project 19C08, which was approved with total funding of $13.1 million. The combined total funding for the two Marlette Dam rehabilitation projects would be $23.5 million if this project is approved. The scope of the work would include an assessment of existing conditions, including a seismic evaluation, upgrades to protect against seismic events, and replacement of discharge piping and outlet valves. The State Public Works Division indicated that Marlette Lake would be partially drained to facilitate the initial construction of the project, and it's estimated that it would take about 6 years to fully recharge, depending on the natural recharge rates. During this period, the Marlette Lake water system would not be able to pump water from Marlette Lake, and therefore water sales to Carson City would be reduced. The division confirms there are adequate water sources outside the Marlette Lake to meet the Marlette Lake water system's obligation to Story County, and the division also confirms that it has been working with Carson City regarding this reduced water plan for future years. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C22 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much. Assemblywoman Bacchus, second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes, and we'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is 23C23, Reconfigure West Entrance, Valley of Fire State Park. Governor recommends state funding totaling $1.2 million to design and construct a reconfigured west entrance for the Valley of Fire State Park to incorporate additional entrance lanes that can utilize self-paced stations. A two-entry vehicular lane would be constructed at the west entrance. Entrance lanes would also feature a self-paced station to accommodate park visitors expediently. The existing entry station would have a newly upgraded fee booth and shade structure over the vehicular check-in lane. Sorry about that. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C23 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? Thank you very much. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes, and we'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. CIP Project 23C24 is the Bradley Building demolition in Las Vegas. The governor recommends $1.7 million in general fund appropriations to design and demolish the Bradley Building in Las Vegas. The Bradley Building is 28,275 square feet and was constructed in 1975. This building has been vacant for some time, and the division indicates that vacant buildings are a target for theft and vandalism, which poses a liability to the state. Demolition of this building would save on monthly costs for electricity, fire inspections, landscaping, Capitol Police surveillance, and vandalism repairs. If the project is approved, the division anticipates the project would commence in April 2024 and be completed by December 2024. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C24 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much. I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend approval of the CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. CIP Project 23C25 is a field maintenance shop #1 remodel at the Floyd Edzal Training Center. The governor recommends $7.8 million in general fund appropriations to construct locker room space, restrooms, break room space, classrooms, office and storage areas at the existing field maintenance shop #1 in North Las Vegas. According to the State Public Works Division, the design would begin October 2023. Construction would commence April 2025, with the facility being complete and open for use in March 2026. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C25 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much. I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is CIP 23C27, Gymnasium Addition and Remodel, Summit View Youth Center. The governor recommends $4.5 million in general fund appropriations to design and construct additional multi-purpose rooms, a restroom, athletic flooring, air conditioning system, and closed-circuit TV system in the gymnasium at the Summit View Youth Center. Project would also replace the lighting and bleachers and add insulation to the wall and roof assemblies. The addition of 2 multi-purpose rooms of approximately 600 square feet each would provide additional indoor recreational opportunities for the youth. The division indicates that extreme Las Vegas temperatures do not allow the youth to use the gym safely. Adding a new air conditioning system would provide the necessary heating and cooling to increase recreational participation. The division indicates the design would begin in December 2023, construction would commence February 2025, and the facility would be completed and open for intended use by December 2026 if the project is approved. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project C27 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, second by Senator Canizaro. All those in favor say aye. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project, 23C28, is an administration building at the Sahara Complex in Las Vegas. The governor originally recommended $150.5 million in state general obligation bonds to design and construct a 130,000 square foot office building to provide office space for agencies currently in lease space. However, on April 3rd, 2023, Governor's Finance Office submitted a budget amendment to the Fiscal Analysis Division recommending that this project be withdrawn as it is no longer necessary due to the recommendation to add CIP Project 23C35, Purchase of State Office Buildings in Las Vegas. Does the subcommittee wish to not recommend approval of CIP Project 23C28 as recommended in the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to not recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended in the governor's budget amendment.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, second by Senator Cannizzaro. Any discussion on this project? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Project 23C29, State Office Building Grant Sawyer Office Site, Las Vegas. The governor originally recommended $186.3 million in state general obligation bonds to design and construct a 125,000 square foot state office building and parking structure at the Grant Sawyer office site. However, the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment recommends withdrawal of this project as it's no longer necessary due to the purchase of office buildings in Las Vegas. The recommendation for the purchase of office buildings in Las Vegas in Project 23C35. Does the subcommittee wish to not recommend approval of CIP Project 23C29 as recommended in the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected in the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to not recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended in the governor's budget amendment.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and second by Senator Cannizzaro. Any discussion on this project? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is 23C30, Administration Building, Kincaid Building Site in Carson City. The governor recommends $158.5 million in general obligation bonds to design and construct a 130,000 square foot office building at the Capitol Complex for the Building and Ground section to rent to state agencies. The Kincaid building was demolished in 2017, and the division indicates the new office building would accommodate 350 to 400 employees. If this project is approved, the division anticipates construction would commence in September 2025, with the facility being completed and open for use in September 2027. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C30 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much. And second, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and a second by Senator Cannizzaro. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record again. CIP Project 23C32 is a storage building at the Northern Nevada Veterans Home. The governor recommends $2.1 million in general fund appropriations to design and construct a 2,400 square foot storage building at the Northern Nevada State Veterans Home in Sparks. The storage building would include concrete masonry units on the lower walls, roll-up doors, fire sprinkler, and heating. The Northern Nevada State Veterans Home was constructed in 2019. If approved, the division advises the design of the project would begin October 2023, with final design delivered by December 2024, and the construction would commence in May of 2025, with the building anticipated to be completed and open for use October 2025. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C32 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus. A second by Senator Cannizzaro. Any discussion on this budget? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project, 23C33, is the Southern Nevada Small Arms Range, Nevada Army National Guard. The governor recommends $17 million in state general obligation bonds to design and construct a small arms range consisting of a 4-lane rifle and pistol target range. The project would also include a control tower, restrooms, classroom, ammunition break building, lead recovery system, operations, a storage building, covered pad with bleachers, parking area, and access to existing roads. The justification indicates the Nevada Army National Guard service members currently travel out of state to receive weapons training. The facility would be located on 25 acres of land leased from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department and Clark County. The Office of the Military indicates an anticipated no-cost operating lease, but indicates the lease agreement has not yet been finalized. The Office of the Military advises it expends approximately $500,000 each year on out-of-state travel for weapons qualifications training for service members. The agency notes the future estimated annual operating expenses for the arms range total approximately $201,654 for the cost of 2 salaried personnel, operations, and maintenance. Accordingly, the net annual cost savings would be $298,346 if this project is approved. The division anticipates the project design would begin October 2023 and construction would start in October 2024, with the facility being completed and open for use in January 2026 if approved. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23 C33 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend approval of the CIP project as recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Waller. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project, 23C34, is a new project added through budget amendment received on April 3rd, and this is for the demolition of the Silver Springs Conservation Camp. The governor recommends $3 million in general fund appropriations to demolish all structures on the site of the Silver Springs Conservation Camp. The project would remove site utilities, site improvements, and revegetate to restore the site to a pre-development condition. The justification indicates this facility was shut down in 2010 due to the high operational and improvement costs to mitigate arsenic in the water system. The Silver Springs Conservation Camp was a minimum security prison constructed in 1991 and is located about 5 miles west of Silver Springs in northern Nevada. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C34 as added to the governor's recommended 2023 CIP through the budget amendment received on April 3rd, 2023, and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much. I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as added to the governor's recommended 2023 CIP through budget amendment.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this motion? Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and sorry I jumped the gun earlier as it was just on the initial pages, and this is the first time we're hearing this, so it's just been presented, and so we hadn't had the opportunity to look at this before. And as I stated earlier, this is indeed in my district, and it is something that has been a subject of discussion now since I've been in office about a decade, and so I am wondering about a number of things. We had 3 prior budgets that we closed on demolition of buildings, significantly lower cost. The Bradley building, 1.7, the cottages, 1.4, and then the fire stations, 722,000. So this is a $3 million operation, and I'm just wondering if we could just have an explanation on that cost, because I'm concerned, as stated in the presentation, that this property is difficult to use because of that arsenic level in that water, and just wondering the revegetation and all this process. What are we getting for this money? And again, I'm pleased that it's happening, because again, it's something that has been out there just standing vacant like for a long time now. So if that's okay, just an explanation.
Madam Chair, thank you. Julie Waller for the record. I would direct the senator to page 41 of the packet for a cost breakdown, but if you have additional questions beyond what is identified there, the construction cost detail identifies the cost for each different activity, site restoration, revegetation, the building demolition, leach field removal, wet utility removal, dry utility removal, water tank demolition, as well as a well abandonment.
Right.
And I
And I-
mentioned if you have additional questions.
Right, and thank you for that, because I see that, but that's where my questions arise, like the design and supervision over a year, 200,000, and then are we redesigning it again for another 200,000? It just seems exorbitant.
Thank you very much, Senator. I believe Mr. Lefevre is at the table, and he can answer maybe the question.
Thank you for the question. This is Kent Lefevre, Administrator of State Public Works Division. The reason that the $3 million price tag is on that, as Ms. Waller has pointed out, there are several items to decommission on this building, on this site. Not the least of which is the water service system. We've got to yank that tank out of there and take it away and seal the well. We've also got to do what they call a down and out on the utilities, which includes power and I think there's propane out there. We've got to remove. The additional costs too are there's several buildings out there that need to be removed. It's not just a few. They've all got to be removed through the foundations. We've got to remove all the foundations and haul all that material to landfill. So there are several steps to take care of. The other thing I would add is that there may be hazardous materials that we need to address before we even remove or knock down buildings.
Just a quick question, and I'll be done with this. Just future expectations for this property?
Kent Lefevre for the record. I can't really comment on that. Perhaps state lands could.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the question. Senator Titus, Charlie Donahue, Administrator for State Lands. The plan would be to dispose of the property.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair, for your patience.
Thank you very much. And any additional questions? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much. And we will move on. Ms. Waller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. The next project is 23C35. This is a new project added through the budget amendment, two budget amendments actually, the purchase of state office buildings in Las Vegas. The governor recommends $213.9 million in general obligation bonds to purchase 18 office buildings in Las Vegas for state use. The justification indicates the purchase of the 18 commercial office buildings is less expensive than remodeling existing state office buildings or constructing new state office buildings in Las Vegas. The buildings are located south of the I-215 near the Harry Reid International Airport and in the McCarran Center. The division indicates this location would be convenient to much of the state's workforce in Las Vegas, and the proximity of the buildings to each other would promote efficiency. The 18 office buildings would be purchased in 4 separate tranches. I would also note that of the 18 office buildings, 3 would be designated for the legislative branch and 15 would be for the executive branch. Again, the 4 separate tranches, 7 buildings would be purchased or would be planned to be purchased in July 2023, 3 buildings October 2023, 7 buildings March 2024, and 1 building in March 2025. And as mentioned earlier, with this additional project to purchase the buildings, the governor recommended the withdrawal of 4 additional construction projects, which resulted in a reduction of approximately, I think it was $350.9 million. On April 30th, the April 3rd budget amendment initially proposed the purchase of 14 office buildings and a parking garage in Las Vegas, which combined provided a total of 650,423 square feet in Las Vegas. However, on April 30th, the Governor's Finance Office submitted a second budget amendment to the Governor's recommended 2023 CIP, which, among other things, revised this project to include the purchase of 4 additional buildings, bringing the total number of recommended building purchases to 18 for a total cost of $213.9 million. The revision to the CIP Project 23C35 results in an increase of $47.4 million when compared to the original purchase price of $166.5 million to purchase 14 buildings. The Governor also has requested that language be included in the 2023 CIP legislation, allowing for a general fund advance for the building purchases if the general obligation bonds are not yet issued at the time of purchase. If such an advance is made, the general fund would be repaid immediately upon the issuance of the bonds. CIP legislation has historically included language similar to this request, whereupon approval of the Director of the Governor's Finance Office and the State Controller may temporarily advance general funds to facilitate work for CIP projects funded with general obligation bonds and require that general fund is repaid within the same fiscal year in which the advance has been made. There would need to be new language considerations specific to the building purchases to allow for a general fund advance, and if directed to include such language, fiscal staff would work with the LCB legal staff and the Treasurer's Office, as well as bond counsel and the Governor's Finance Office, to ensure such an advance could be made if necessary. So, as the subcommittee is aware, this plan to purchase a large number of buildings in Las Vegas has been very fluid since the discussions initially began, with the possible recommendation, including the number of buildings, the planned occupants, and the plans to operate and maintain the facilities. The level of required tenant improvements and furniture and fixtures and equipment. It should be noted that several of the buildings planned for purchase currently have occupants, including state and non-state entities, for which existing leases would need to be honored. While information has been requested, the Governor's Finance Office has not yet provided any information on the potential impacts that may be experienced with the State Public Works Division's building and grounds budget, including anticipated rental revenues and expenditure levels associated with utilities, janitorial, operating, and staffing needs in order to maintain the new buildings. Other than the Governor's Office, constitutional officers, and the legislative branch, it's not clear at this time which state agencies would occupy the buildings if they are purchased, or when those state agencies may actually move into the newly acquired facilities. Given the magnitude of the purchased transactions and the unknowns around the plan, to ensure a successful transition to moving state agencies from privately owned space into the purchased facilities, the subcommittee may wish to recommend that a letter of intent be issued to provide the interim finance committee with periodic updates on the building acquisitions that will occur over the 23-25 biennium, status of the required tenant improvements, the impacts to the building and grounds budget, including operational and utility costs, and the identification of any additional staffing needs in order to properly manage and maintain the new facilities. So the top of page 28. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C35 as added to the Governor's recommended 2023 CIP through and modified in the April 3rd and April 30th budget amendments as reflected on the closing document? And does the subcommittee wish to recommend that language be included in the 2023 CIP legislation allowing for a general fund advance for the building purchases if the general obligation bonds are not yet issued at the time of purchase, and require that the general fund be repaid immediately upon the issuance of the bonds if such an advance is approved? And does the subcommittee wish to recommend that the money committees issue a letter of intent requiring the State Public Works Division to report to the interim finance committee on a quarterly basis or some other frequency, providing but not limited to updates on the building acquisitions that will occur over the 2023-25 biennium, a status of required tenant improvements, impacts to the building and grounds budget, including operational and utility costs, and the identification of any additional staffing needs in order to properly manage and maintain the new facilities?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend approval of this CIP project as added to the governor's recommended 2023 CIP through budget amendment, and recommend that the language be included in the 2023 CIP legislation allowing for the general fund advancement should general obligation bonds not be yet issued, and recommend that the money committee issues a letter of intent requiring the State Public Works Division to report to the interim finance committee on a quarterly basis, providing but not limited to the items listed in this decision.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus. A second by Senator Canizaro. And any discussion? Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank Director Rob, who's here in the room, for bringing this project to us. I know there's been a lot of work done on making this happen. Obviously makes a lot of sense for the state, and particularly wanted to thank him for working with the Legislative Council Bureau to figure out how the legislature could be involved in this project. I think there are a lot of upsides of having governor, constitutional offices, other state agencies co-located with the legislature on one campus. I think that's going to make it better for constituents and better for branches of government working together. So wanted to take a moment to thank him and Director Erdos for working so hard on getting this here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or discussion on this unit? Senator Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to thank Mr. Rob for his help. This is a significant campus, and we would not have been able to find it, without you. And my understanding is many of the buildings are in very good condition. So the savings the state will see will be substantial, not just from the original purpose, but from ongoing costs as well. So thank you very much for your work and for the time that you spent actually with me too, looking at some of the buildings. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and I would echo those. Mr. Rob has worked very, very hard on this project and has spent hours making sure that this is right for the state of Nevada. So with that discussion, I would ask all of those in favor say aye. Aye. All of those say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Rob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did you want me to move on? Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project for consideration is Project 23C36, Purchase Building Improvements. This is also a new project added through budget amendment. The governor recommends $74.5 million in general fund appropriations to provide design and construction of projects to ready 15 of the 18 recommended building purchases for occupancy, as well as site improvement project to design and construct site monument signs, a large gateway sign, and campus identity programming. The three buildings for which there is no funding recommended would be the buildings to be owned by the legislative branch. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C36 as added to the governor's recommended 2023 CIP through the April 30th, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as added to the governor's recommendation via budget amendment.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and a second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion? Assemblywoman Bacchus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question because when I was looking at this, it indicates that their site improvements mainly to signage, and so I wasn't sure if there was going to be additional tenant improvements, and I kind of cross-referenced to our backup materials in here, and it's not too specific. So my question was curious if it was just signage, and then also if this is signage that we may have to redo in years to come, or if it's kind of just generic like state of Nevada signage for the properties.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rob, Mr. Lefevre, one of you have the answer to that, please.
Kent Lefevre for the record. The $75 million includes a number of things for each building. And so just to give you an example, there is, even though these buildings will be move-in ready from the perspective of the developer or the seller, there still will be need for tenant improvements specific to each agency. So for each building, we have carved out a partial and tenant improvement number. This would be to add additional offices if needed, or reconfigure different aspects of the building to suit the tenant. There will also be security cameras. For example, in 1 Harris Court, there will be security cameras. Each building is going to be refitted with data and telecom wiring and equipment. There'll be door card access and wayfinding. And in addition to that, we've already kind of touched on it, site signage. We envision that there's going to be a uniform signage package for this campus so that wayfinding is easy for patrons and for staff. And although that hasn't been determined yet, we do have a budget number on that.
Thank you so much. I just was making sure, because when I saw that $74 million and it kind of talked about a lot of signage, I was just worried that would be something we would be incurring when there may be a change of administration. And it looks like a lot of that is structural stuff, as you indicated, for the numerous buildings being allotted a certain sum to do their necessary build outs up and above the move-in ready. So I thank you for that.
Yes, thank you very much, because I know now that currently the Taxation Department and Cannabis Compliance Board is there, and I don't believe there is any signage. Am I correct?
Jack Robb, Director of Department Administration, for the record. At the current time, there is no signage for taxation and cannabis. They have brought forward some mock-ups that they want to go forward with, but we've kind of held off on that, looking for an overall name of the complex. We may not stay with McCarran Center. It may have a different name going forward, and then appropriate signage for each agency.
Okay, thank you very much. And I just concur with my colleague here that what we don't want to do is start putting specific names of whoever on a building, because then we would be changing those out as staff changes. So thank you very much. And with that, no more discussion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record, Fiscal Analysis Division. The next project is 23C37. It's the purchase of 3850 Arrowhead, purchase and improvement of this building in Carson City. This is a project that was brought forward through budget amendment. The governor recommends $24.5 million in general obligation bonds for the purchase of and for improvements to 3850 Arrowhead Drive in Carson City for state office use. Justification, again, indicates a commercial office building is less expensive than remodeling existing state office buildings or constructing new state office buildings in Carson City. It's unclear from the information provided how much the purchase price would be for this building, and therefore how much of the recommended funding would support the purchase versus being used for tenant improvements for the building. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23C37 as added to the governor's recommended 2023 CIP through the April 30th, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to not recommend approval of the CIP project as recommended in the governor's 2023 CIP budget amendment.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus. A second by Senator Cannizzaro. Any discussion on this project? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Please move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes the discussion of the construction projects recommended in the governor's 2023 CIP. I would direct your attention at this point now to the attachment 1, which is the tables, the legal size tables. And that is the maintenance projects are identified on pages 6 through 11. There are 40 maintenance projects that are recommended in the 2023 CIP. You'll notice that of these 40 projects, most of them are shaded gray, which indicates that staff did not have any additional discussion or question for these projects. However, 3 of the 40 projects are identified for a discussion in your closing packet. So with that, Madam Chair, certain projects then, unless members would like to pull any of the shaded projects for discussion, fiscal staff would recommend that a single motion be taken for consideration of the projects that are grayed out on your document. And Madam Chair, I'll give you time to review that. And
Thank you very much. And members, I'm going to pause just for a minute here and let everybody look at that table and make sure there's nothing that they are concerned with. It's on page 6.
Madam Chair, it's attachment 1 of your packet. Didn't get one. Assemblywoman.
You should all have attachment 1, and there are page numbers down at the very, very far right-hand corner. And they're like 1 of 14, 2 of 14, etc. Okay, is anybody have anything that they're concerned about? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Senator Neal.
Madam Chair, so I just had questions on I guess it was the security cameras, the surveillance for Department of Corrections. It looks like it's around, I think, 8 million. Well, you're asking me to do like super reading.
Look on, Senator Neal, if you'll look on the left-hand side, there's a project number. Is it 23M08 that you're looking at on the very bottom, or?
No, well, yeah, that's one of them, Indian Springs, and then there is another one. Oh, 23M14 and 23M13. And then, yeah, the 23M17.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell us a specific question, Senator?
So the question, what I was trying to figure out, because I guess in 2019 I was on that subcommittee, and I just remember them installing cameras back then, and now we're in 23. The progression of the money from, I guess, the biennium of 19 to 21, and then now we're here with, it looks like, over 11 million in cameras.
All right. Is there anyone here from the agency to answer that question? Oh, they're in the other subcommittee.
That's fine. I'll follow up with Chair Harris.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, any additional questions or comments on this?
Madam Chair, for the record, Brody Lizer, LCB Fiscal. I would just note it is typical to have these types of projects for corrections each biennium for camera systems, door locks. The projects that are recommended for the 23 CIP would be for different housing units than those having been approved in the 2019 session. But we can certainly work, Senator Neal, to get you some information on what was approved in 2019 for which facilities, which housing units, and how those differ from the recommendations here for the subcommittee today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, do I have any other comments? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion on the table. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much, Ms. Waller. We'll go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the first project, maintenance project for discussion is 23 M01 Nevada System of Higher Education Deferred Maintenance. Governor originally recommended $15 million in slot tax funding to support deferred maintenance projects for INCHE. Historically, INCHE has received $15 million each biennium for this purpose as part of the legislatively approved CIP mix of slot tax revenues.
Okay, we're going to roll back for just a minute. We missed the motion on that last one. So, Ms. Waller, if you could pause just for a minute, we'll go back to a decision unit 23C37. And we paused and looked at the attachment, and then I was in error, so I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair, since we're not setting aside any of those shaded areas on the maintenance list, I would move to recommend approval of CIP projects 23M02 through 23M-M06, 23-M08 through 23-M11, 23M13 through 23M27, and CIP projects 23-M429 through, actually, that's just 29, sorry about that. M29 through 23-M51 as reflected on the closing documents.
Okay, now, thank you, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and a second from Senator Canizaro. Now, any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. I just got so excited when I saw INCHE, I jumped ahead. So thank you very much. We will go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. Again, resuming our discussion of Project 23M01. The governor originally recommended $15 million in slot tax funding to support deferred maintenance projects for INCHE. Historically, INCHE has received $15 million each biennium for this purpose as part of the legislatively approved CIP funding, with a mix of slot tax revenue dependent upon availability and state funds. I would note that INCHE has identified an additional $91.7 million in immediate deferred maintenance needs. The table at the bottom of page 29 reflects the anticipated allocation of that $15 million amongst the campuses for their deferred maintenance needs. The Governor's Finance Office indicated during the budget hearing and since that time that the projected slot tax revenues for the 23-25 biennium are lower than the $15 million recommended for this project. And as a result, the difference is recommended to be funded with general fund appropriations. As such, on April 3rd, the Governor's Finance Office submitted a budget amendment recommending the addition of $12 million in general fund appropriations with a corresponding decrease of $12 million in slot tax funding, resulting in $3 million in slot tax revenue and $12 million in general fund appropriations to fund the costs of CIP Project 2301. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23M01, funded with $12 million in general fund appropriations and $3 million in slot tax revenue, as recommended in the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend approval of this CIP project as funded by the governor's recommended budget amendment.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus. A second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next maintenance project for discussion is 23M07. This is a warehouse air conditioning upgrade for the Department of Motor Vehicles in the Flamingo office in Las Vegas. The governor recommended $535,254 in highway fund appropriations for the replacement of warehouse evaporative cooling units with rooftop air conditioning equipment for the DMV's Flamingo office. As we've previously discussed, the budget amendment received on April 3rd recommended that the addition of $535,254 in general obligation bonds to be repaid with highway fund replace the original highway fund appropriations recommended for this project. As noted previously, for general obligation debt that has a 20-year payback cycle, funding should be not used for projects that have a useful life less than 16 years, 8 months, as the anticipated useful life of CIP Project 23M07 does not meet the estimated useful life threshold. Consideration could be given to fund the CIP project with highway fund appropriations rather than the general obligation bonds to be repaid from highway funds as recommended in the budget amendment. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23M07 funded with highway fund appropriations as originally recommended by the governor, or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23M07 with general obligation bonds to be repaid from the highway fund as recommended in the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing sheet?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project funded with highway fund appropriations as originally recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus. A second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is 23M28, replacement of surveillance cameras, door access controls, and security system at the Department of Motor Vehicles Flamingo office. Governor originally recommended $2.2 million in highway funds for the replacement of this equipment at the DMV's Flamingo office. And similar to the item that was just discussed, the budget amendment on April 3rd recommended a change of funding source for this project from highway fund appropriations to general obligation bonds to be repaid from highway fund. Again, as the anticipated useful life of this project does not meet the estimated useful life threshold, consideration could be given to fund this project with highway fund appropriations rather than the general obligation bonds to be repaid from the highway fund as recommended in the budget amendment. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23M28 funded with highway fund appropriations as originally recommended by the governor, or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23M28 with general obligation bonds to be repaid from the highway fund as recommended in the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of the CIP project funded with highway fund appropriations as originally recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Turning again to the attachment 1, there are a total of 7 planning projects identified on this table. And 4 of the 7 are shaded in gray, while 3 of the 7 are identified for additional discussion in your closing document. Unless members would like to pull any of the shaded projects for discussion, fiscal staff would recommend that a single motion be taken for consideration on these projects that are shaded in gray on your table in attachment 1. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP projects 23P06 through 23P09 as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much, Ms. Waller, and I will give committee a few minutes to look at that before I call for the motion. Okay, is there anyone who wishes to pull an item? Assemblywoman Bacchus.
Madam Chair, with that, I would go ahead and recommend approval of CIP projects 23P06 through 23P09 as reflected in attachment 1 to our closing documents.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus. Second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. The first planning project for discussion for the subcommittee's consideration is 23P01 Advanced Planning Headquarters Building, Carson City. The governor recommends total funding of $17.6 million, consisting of $5.8 million in highway fund appropriations and $11.8 million in general fund appropriations to complete programming and design through construction documents for a new Department of Public Safety headquarters campus in Carson City. This project is a continuation of CIP Project 21P04. The justification for this project indicates the goal is to consolidate the DPS headquarters into a single centralized campus facility and construct a state forensic laboratory. The proposed location is on a 15-acre parcel in Carson City, which was a previous location of the Nevada Army National Guard. Regarding potential cost savings from consolidating DPS staff from leased space to the DPS headquarters campus, the DPS projects cost savings would be approximately $2.4 million per biennium. If this project is approved, it's anticipated that approximately $324 million construction project would be requested in the 2025 CIP. Further, the department states that the state of Nevada does not currently have a state crime lab, and a state forensic testing laboratory would provide the DPS with the ability to conduct these forensic testing services in-house and increase the criminal forensic capabilities within the state. The budget amendment received on April 3rd recommends $5.8 million in general obligation bonds to be repaid from the highway funds, replace the $5.8 million in highway fund appropriations originally recommended by the governor for this project. While bonding for planning project is an allowable approach, as a useful life consideration looks at the project in its entirety, the planning, construction, and useful life of the constructed facility, fiscal staff would note that no other planning projects in the governor's recommended CIP are funded with general obligation bonds. Subcommittee could consider funding this project as originally recommended by the governor. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23P01 funded with $11.8 million in general fund appropriations and $5.8 million in highway fund appropriations as originally recommended by the governor? Or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23P01 funded with $11.8 million in general fund appropriations and $5.8 million in general obligation bonds to be repaid from the highway fund as recommended in the April 3rd budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
Thank you very much. And with that, I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project as funded with $11.8 million in general fund appropriations and $5.8 million in highway fund appropriations as originally recommended by the governor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and second by Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this project? Senator Tice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious if somebody from the department could tell me if one of the, and I'm supportive of the state forensic testing lab, but wondering, one of the arguments in favor of it is to make sure that we could do all the forensic testing in state, because now we're sending a lot out of state, and that this would allow us to do it here. Will we be able to do all the testing that's required for forensic studies here in the state with this new lab?
So I don't, oh, there's Ms. Brueggerman. You were behind ahead. Welcome. Thank you. We're glad you're here. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Sherry Brigham for the record, Deputy Director for the Department of Public Safety. Yes, that is the intent. We'll be starting with the northern areas and the eastern areas first. And depending on the volume coming in, we may just up the spatial areas, or we may be looking at a second lab in the south. But yes, that is the intent.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the question.
Thank you very much. Any additional discussion? All right. Thank you very much. So with that, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next project is 23P04, Advanced Planning, North Las Vegas State Veterans Home. The governor recommends total funding of $15.5 million, consisting of $5.4 million in general fund appropriations and $10.1 million in federal funds to complete advanced planning through construction documents for a 128-bed, single occupancy, 120,000 square foot skilled nursing facility on the Veterans Affairs campus in North Las Vegas on land to be donated to the state by the Veterans Affairs Southern Nevada Healthcare System. If this project is approved, construction funding of approximately $232 million would be requested for this project in the 2025 Capital Improvement Program. The funding description indicates that federal grant reimbursement would occur after the advanced planning project has been completed. In discussion with the Governor's Finance Office on this issue, the Governor's Finance Office determined that submitted a budget amendment on April 30th and recommends replacing the $10.1 million in federal funds with $10.1 million in general fund appropriations, bringing the total general fund appropriations for this project to $15.5 million. The April 30, 2023 budget amendment also recommends that the Department of Veterans Affairs deposit any federal funds awarded for this advanced planning project to the state general fund immediately upon receipt of such federal funds. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23P04 funded with general fund appropriations totaling $15.5 million and recommend that fiscal staff include language in the 2023 CIP legislation that requires the Department of Veterans Services to deposit any federal funds awarded for this advanced planning project to the state general fund immediately upon receipt of such federal funds as recommended in the April 30, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document.
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of this CIP project funded with general fund appropriations totaling $15.5 million, and also recommend that fiscal staff include language in the 2023 CIP legislation that requires the Department of Veterans Services to deposit any federal funds awarded for this advanced planning project to the state general fund immediately upon receipt of such federal funds as recommended in the governor's budget amendment.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and I'll take a second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this item? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. The next project is 23P10, Advanced Planning State Office Building, the Capitol Complex. This is a project that was added through budget amendment. The governor recommends $10.8 million in general fund appropriations to provide advanced planning through construction documents for a 130,000 square foot building for buildings and grounds to rent to state agencies. If this planning project is approved, the division anticipates a $179 million construction project would be requested in the 2025 CIP. This site for this project has previously been occupied by the Boys and Girls Club and the Division of Child and Family Services and the Northern Nevada Children's Home. The buildings on this site have been vacated and are proposed to be demolished prior to the construction of this building. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP Project 23P10 as added to the governor's recommended 2023 CIP through the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
And I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to not recommend approval of CIP Project 23P10 as added to the governor's recommended 2023 CIP through the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment.
Thank you very much, and I'll Assemblywoman Bacchus, and I'll take a second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this motion? Assemblyman Yeager.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am supportive of the motion of not approving this project, and I just wanted to kind of explain why. We've heard a lot in the last few days about the need to be fiscally responsible and the need to not encumber the state long-term for things that we can't afford. We have already approved P01, P04, and P06 through 9. If we were to approve this project, by my calculations, we would be looking at upwards of $1 billion in construction costs in the next biennium, and I don't think we're going to have the capacity to bond for that sort of money. I might be a little high on that because we get reimbursement from a couple of the projects, but still I think that is a bridge too far, and what I don't want to do is outlay $10.8 million in planning costs and then be back here next biennium with the inability to actually construct the building. So while I recognize the need for it, in the spirit of being fiscally responsible and not encumbering the state too much for the upcoming biennium and the next one, I am supportive of not approving this project at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional comments? Thank you. And with that, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes, and we'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're on the final stretch here. We're in your attachment 1 on page 13 and 14 of your the table are the statewide planning projects, and there is just one of those projects that is not shaded, while the remaining 12 projects are shaded. And so, Madam Chair, unless members would like to pull any of the shaded projects for discussion, fiscal staff would recommend that a single motion be taken for consideration on the shaded projects.
Thank you very much, and we'll pause just for a moment to let members look at this spreadsheet with items. All right, members, anyone with any questions or any comments? All right, not seeing any, I will ask for a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend approval of CIP projects 23-S01 through 23-S05 and CIP projects 23-S06 and 23-09. Madam Chair, let me correct that motion. I'd move to recommend approval of CIP projects 23-S01 through 23-S05G2 and CIP projects 23-S06 and 23-S09.
Thank you very much. And Assemblywoman Bacchus, and I'll take a second from Senator Canizaro. And any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes, and we'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Julie Waller for the record. Project 23S05H, statewide paving program with Highway Fund. The governor originally recommended $1.8 million in Highway Fund appropriations to design, construct, and maintain pavements throughout the state. However, the budget amendment received on April 3rd revised this funding source to general obligation bonds to be repaid from the Highway Fund. However, the State Public Works Division indicates the anticipated useful life of this project is less than 20 years. Therefore, consideration could be given to fund this project with Highway Fund appropriations as originally recommended. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP project 23S05H funded with Highway Fund appropriations as originally recommended by the governor? Or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of CIP project 23S05H with general obligation bonds to be repaid from the Highway Fund as recommended in the April 3rd, 2023 budget amendment and as reflected on the closing document?
All right. I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend approval of CIP project 23-S05H funded with Highway Fund appropriations as originally recommended by the governor.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and a second from Senator Canizaro. Any questions or discussion? Assemblywoman Bacchus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just couldn't remember if we saw this one because there was multiple statewide paving projects. And understanding that these are slurry and probably like repairs to various highways, I was curious if we had a certain plan that was already in place that we were just implementing these repairs and upkeep to, or if there was like a specific area that this statewide paving project was for.
Is there anybody here from the agency that can answer that question?
Madam Chair, for the record, this is Brody Lizer with LCB Fiscal. The statewide paving program here, SO5H, that's funded with highway funds, this is for facilities throughout the state, and what is identified to be funded with the $1.8 million, I believe, is this project. There's a pavement maintenance at Reno, Nevada Highway Patrol facility, the Flamingo DMV, the license plate factory here in Carson City. There's a upgrade for the motorcycle test pad at the Flamingo DMV, pavement preservation at the Carson City DMV office, and a upgrade to the motorcycle test pad at the Decatur DMV. Those are the facilities that would be initially funded with this funding if this project's approved. If there's any savings beyond that, there are additional DMV facilities that are identified for pavement preservation at the Sahara DMV and the South Reno DMV, as well as motorcycle test pad upgrades at the Sahara and South Reno DMV, if there's sufficient savings to get to those projects.
Thank you very much. All right, any additional questions? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Please move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The final item for consideration is found on page 35 of the packet. And this is for the subcommittee's consideration financing option for the revised 2023 CIP. If approved, the governor's revised 2023 CIP would result in a net reduction of $73.4 million in state general obligation bonds when compared to the original $560.9 million in state general obligation bonds originally recommended to fund the 2023 CIP. Those figures would need to be updated based on the subcommittee's actions here today. However, the concept is still the same. As such, the subcommittee may wish to consider financing projects with an estimated useful life of 20 years or more, which are currently recommended to be financed with general fund appropriations, with general obligation bonds up to and including the $73.4 million or the revised figure that staff would provide, to utilize the authority available for the 2023-25 biennium. Subcommittee could then choose to offset general fund appropriations in a commensurate amount, which would result in general fund savings that could be redirected to support other legislative priorities. Alternatively, if the subcommittee did not wish to consider revising the funding recommendation in the 2023 revised CIP, that bond authority, that unutilized bond authority would be roll forward, be available for use in the subsequent biennium. The table on the page 35 identifies several CIP projects recommended that have a useful life of 20 years or more. Fiscal staff has prepared the table identifying a subset of these projects based on a project number order from which the subcommittee could choose to revise recommended funding source from general fund appropriations to general obligation bonds to generate general fund savings. On the top of page 36, option for the subcommittee to consider Subcommittee may wish to consider the following option related to the recommended funding sources for a portion of the support of the revised 2023 CIP. Dollar amounts listed above are subject to change depending on the closing action of the subcommittee in approving, modifying, or not approving individual projects as presented on the closing table. But recommend approval of utilizing $559.9 million in state general obligation bonds to support a portion of the cost of the revised CIP. If the subcommittee makes its recommendations, it would result in general fund savings of $72.4 million, or the revised amount based on the update, if all projects recommended by the governor, inclusive of the amendments, are approved. If the subcommittee recommends approval of the issuance of $559.9 million in general obligation bonds to support the 2023 CIP, fiscal staff would request authority to make adjustments to individual project state funding sources, including the projects identified above, and would present the funding source changes as part of the subcommittee's recommendations to the full committees to account for all of the subcommittee recommendations and to identify final general fund savings that would be realized.
Thank you very much, and I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend approval of the $559.9 million in state general obligation bonds to support a portion of the cost of the revised 2023 CIP, and move to recommend that fiscal staff have authority to make adjustments to individual project state funding sources, including projects identified above, and would present the funding source changes as part of the subcommittee's recommendation to the full committees to account for all subcommittee recommendations and to identify the final general fund savings that would be realized.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and I will accept a second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Waller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will take just a quick break as we change out staff, and we will welcome Mr. Luna as we prepare for the next piece. All right, we will reconvene. Thank you. And we have Mr. Luna ready, and so we'll go ahead. Mr. Luna, when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Justin Luna for the record, Fiscal Analysis Division. This morning I'll be covering the general obligation bond programs administered by the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. The department presented this information to the Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation, so I'll provide a brief overview and then get to the decision points. The Department of Conservation and Natural Resources administers 4 resource protection programs that are funded through general obligation bonds. The Conservation Bond Program, the Lake Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program, or EIP, the Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation Grant Program, and the Water Infrastructure Grant Program. I'll note on the table on page 56 summarizes the recommended bond issuances as amended by the Governor's Finance Office and available affordability as identified by the Treasurer's Office for the DCNR bond programs. And I'll reference these amounts both from the Treasurer's affordability and the Governor's recommended as amended amounts, as well as the differences as I walk through each of the programs. A summary of the information provided by the department on 3 of the DCNR bond programs is included in the packet for your reference, and I will walk the subcommittee through the 3 programs with decision points along the way. So the first DCNR program for discussion is on page 57, the Conservation Bond Program. The executive budget recommends the issuance of $23.3 million for CIP Project 23C20, which was recommended for approval earlier during the CIP discussion, to expand the Nevada State Railroad Museum in Boulder City. And the state treasurer identified total bonding authority of $43.3 million, which was noted above in the differences of $20 million in the table on page 56. Assembly Bill 84 from the 2019 legislative session authorized conservation bond funding with specific allocations totaling $217.5 million, as summarized on the table on page 57 in the specific categories. The agency indicated that of the initial $20 million approved through Assembly Bill 492 by the 2021 legislative session, a total of $17.5 million of that initial $20 million has been either spent or obligated under contract. The department also provided information on additional needs for projects throughout the state, and shared how the additional $20 million identified in the Treasurer's affordability report as supplemental to the Governor's recommendation might be used in the Conservation Nevada Bond Program as identified in the bulleted projects on page 58. If additional bonds are recommended by the subcommittee, fiscal staff will follow up with the agency to identify specific projects to align with the allocations in AB 84 for the enabling legislation. That's Assembly Bill 84 from the 2019 session. And I will note towards the bottom of page 58, it has a discussion there of the Ely Freight Barn project. That was projects 23C12 that was approved during the CIP discussion, and it included $3.7 million in state general obligation bonds taken from the AB 84 funding to balance that project, that total $7.7 million, as Ms. Waller indicated earlier. So that will leave of the recommended $20 million from the Treasurer's, the additional $20 million from the Treasurer's affordability report, only 16.3. So the decision for the subcommittee on the top of page 59, and I'll note this 20 million will now change to 16.3 million. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend $16.3 million of general
general obligation bonds over the 2023-25 biennium for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Conservation Bond Program that is not recommended in the executive budget based on the State Treasurer's General Obligation Debt Capacity and Affordability Report for the 2023-25 biennium, and direct fiscal staff to present the finalized planned uses of funds as part of the subcommittee's report to the full committee.
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to recommend the balance. I think now it's 20 million less the 3.7 million as previously recommended of general obligation bonds over the 2023-25 biennium for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources Conservation Bond Program that is not recommended in the executive budget based on the State Treasurer's General Obligation Debt Capacity and Affordability Report for the 2023-25 biennium, and direct fiscal staff to present the finalized plan uses of the funds as part of the subcommittee's report to the full committees.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and a second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Luna.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Justin Luna for the record. We'll continue on page 59 with the second DCNR bond program, the Lake Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program. As amended, the executive budget recommends the issuance of $13 million, which aligns with the state treasurer's bonding affordability identified for the Lake Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program. The Lake Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program is a partnership of federal, state, and local agencies, private interests, and the Washoe Tribe. State Lands is responsible for coordinating this bond program. Assembly Bill 424 was introduced on March 27, 2023, and passed out of the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources on April 10, 2023, to authorize the issuance of $13 million in general obligation bonds over the 2023-25 biennium to fund environmental improvement projects in the Lake Tahoe Basin. In response to a request for follow-up information, the agency explained how the $13 million could be used to fund priority projects such as watersheds and water quality, forest health, sustainable recreation and transportation, and science stewardship and accountability. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 60. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommended issuances as amended of general obligation bonds totaling $13 million over the 2023-25 biennium for the Lake Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program?
Thank you very much, and I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of the governor's recommended issuances as amended of general obligation bonds totaling $13 million over the 2023-25 biennium for the Lake Tahoe Environmental Improvement Program.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and with that, second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion on this item? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Justin Luna for the record. Continuing on page 60 is the final DCNR bond program that we'll discuss today, the Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation Grant Program. As amended, the executive budget recommends the issuance of $3 million in each year for the Historic Preservation Grant Program. And the state treasurer has identified bonding affordability of $3 million over the biennium. The Treasurer's Office did confirm that based on the state's total bonding affordability, there is sufficient affordability for the additional $3 million included in the governor's amended recommendation for the upcoming biennium. The program is guided by a commission that maintains a plan for the preservation and promotion of cultural resources for awarding grants of financial assistance to preserve and protect historic buildings. The department provided information on the program and indicated any additional bonds would be allocated through a competitive grant process for projects to preserve and protect historic sites. The decision for the subcommittee is on page 61. Does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of the governor's recommended issuances as amended of general obligation bonds of $3 million in each year of the 2023-25 biennium for the Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation Grant Program? Or does the subcommittee wish to recommend approval of general obligation bonds of $3 million over the 2023-25 biennium for the Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation Grant Program, consistent with the affordability amount identified in the Treasurer's Office General Obligation Debt Capacity and Affordability Report?
Thank you very much, and with that, I'll accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I'd move to recommend approval of general obligation bonds of $3 million over the 2023-25 biennium for the Cultural Centers and Historic Preservation Grant Program, consistent with the affordability amount identified in the Treasurer's Office General Obligation Debt Capacity and Affordability Report.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman Bacchus, and with that, I'll take a second from Senator Canizero. And any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. We'll move on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes the DCNR bond program closing report.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will move on to the closing of the Legislative Branch Capital Improvement Program. We have with us LCB Director Erdos to present the CIP request. And members, you should have a one-page document in front of you on LCB letterhead with a list of recommended capital improvement projects and one-shot appropriations for the Legislative Council Bureau. This document has also been posted on Nellis. And Director Erdos, thank you very much for being here. And it's okay. I was just going to say, I guess that's part of our capital improvement projects. You shrunk, but that's okay. It's like you're at the kids' table. But go ahead when you're ready, and thank you for everything you do to keep us running day after day with your staff.
Well, thank you very much. For the record, Brenda Erdos, Director of the Legislative Council Bureau, and I have with me Dan Russian, the CFO of the Legislative Council Bureau, and I just wanted to take a moment and also thank Jack Robb. I've told him personally, but on the record, for offering the buildings offering to include us in the project. We had realized a need for a building in Las Vegas for hearings and staff in excess of the space we were able to get in the building down there, and had looked, I think, very diligently, and then didn't find anything, so we started out this session suggesting a new building. And so what you have here revises that request to actually ask to be a part of the project that you've just heard about. And Dan's going to give you, run through this for you, but we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. For the record, Daniel Russian, Chief Financial Officer of the Legislative Council Bureau. I'm here with the Director to present the LCB's summary CIP schedule and one-shot appropriations for discussion. The schedule provided to you for today's meeting should look somewhat familiar, as it includes many of the projects first presented to the Joint Committee on March 17th. At that time, the LCB, as the Director indicated, was pursuing plans to construct a building in the Las Vegas metropolitan area to provide services to the legislators and constituents who reside in that southern part of the state. As we subsequently presented to the committee on April 29th, the LCB's plans have changed, and now, rather than requesting funding to construct a building, the LCB is planning to occupy existing buildings in southern Nevada that will be purchased by the state and subsequently transferred to the LCB. The revised schedule reflects this change and now includes the estimated improvement costs to make the existing buildings operational and also for the construction of 2 parking garages. The schedule is segregated into 5 sections with subtotals for each. The first 2 sections list the capital improvement projects for the LCB's facilities located in Carson City and the systems and infrastructure utilized by the Information Technology Services Unit. The third and fourth sections list the costs associated with the previously noted expansion of the LCB's Las Vegas office. And the last section lists the LCB's one-shot appropriations request for the 2023-2025 biennium. As the schedule shows, the total CIP appropriations requested are approximately $217.1 million. The director and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have regarding these projects at this time.
Any questions from the committee? Senator Ganser.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank Director Erdos for spending some time with me going over this information. I also spent some time with Jack Robb. And, you know, the original request we had, which wasn't in the executive budget, was $100 million for about 120,000 square foot building. And the buildings we're looking at now, and I'm just talking about the Las Vegas expansion, is almost 200,000 square feet. We're at like 198,000 square feet. And then when I, was going over the numbers, when I looked at the tenant improvements, I'll just go down the tenant improvements, which is like the bottom of 30 of your page. When you look at the 7230 Amigo Street, the tenant improvements for an 82,000 square foot building is about $45 million, which ends up being about $546 a square foot. And the next one down, if you do the math on that one, it's about 716 square feet. And so it was my understanding that these buildings were actually in very good condition. And I know the second one, we're looking at hearing rooms, so that's, different. But sort of the cost for tenant improvements is incredibly high, as well as the square footage associated with what we're trying to accomplish. Because when I went back through the document that was provided last week, it looked like there were about 31 additional staff that would be staffing LCB, and then the remainder were administrative type personnel, so police protection and cleaning staff and some other folks. And we talked about there's some IT staff in there too. But this is such, we've gone from maybe adding 30 people in the south and a building that maybe would be built in 5 years to 200,000 square feet and about $100 million in tenant improvements, and then, a couple of parking garages for $32 million. And it just, it's a huge change and a huge expansion that we've never seen before. And right now I'm just talking about the capital improvements, because if you look at the staff that we're trying to add, we're talking about like a 55% increase in the total staff the LCB has, and about a 71% increase in the costs associated with that workforce.
Thank you for the question. For the record, Brenda Erdos, Legislative Council Bureau. I think there's a lot of factors involved in this, and I think the first thing that I should probably say is that I'm an attorney by trade. I don't have specific experience here in these types of choices, I guess I would say, but we do have a really good staff that I've worked with, and just for the record, I was here when we bought the Sedway office building and remodeled that. In fact, I remember being in that building working with the bank downstairs for about a year. Then I was also part of the team that built the across the street, the printing office building, and made the extra space there, and office space and warehouse space. And so what I've learned from that is that this legislature, as it grows, it does it sort of by leaps and bounds. And watching that happen, I've tried to be cognizant of making the best choices that our team can make to recommend to you what to do here. We initially thought that the amount of space that we asked for was the best choice we could come to at that point. Then in getting looking at the buildings, it turned out that instead of one building, we would be getting this in more than one building. And when you have more than one building, it does take additional space, just because you have a lot more restrooms and hallways and all those sorts of things. As to the employee angle, of this, I think that you've seen in our budget that there's quite a jump in the number of employees at this time. And part of the explanation for that, just really quickly, I know this is a CIP, but COVID changed the way that we operate here. And what happened is that, before COVID, when I was the legislative counsel, there was not the need to have all of the, or there might have been a need, but we didn't fulfill it to have all the ways to communicate in committee, such as the Zoom and the other things that we implemented during COVID. All of those things take, so if you remember previous to that, if you wanted to have anyone who wasn't in the room testify or wasn't at the other end, you actually had to get a phone line that would sometimes go off and on, and it was pretty kludgy to get like an expert from the East Coast. Those are kind of the ones that I remember. But through COVID, our BPS staff was increased incrementally. We did not make those employees permanent at that time because we thought that it was a one-off, if you will, that once COVID was gone, we would go back to a meeting like this. That was pretty short-sighted on my part, honestly. I just didn't anticipate that going forward. So what happened then that interim, we were asked to continue with those same services so that people, because we still had COVID, people could participate by Zoom, and that takes a lot of people. Many of those people are off-site to the ones that welcome you onto the computer. Then we still didn't catch a clue to make them permanent until the decision was made for this session to include that technology, which makes a lot of sense, and it works out. But it does take incrementally more people, and as you, it's not just BPS, it's ITS staff to make it all work. And we have also had a number of other things sort of related to COVID. We found out that having an HR council was very good, and then it turned out that HR council was able to start drafting the contracts that legal used to have to draft, and so we added there to alleviate that requirement, because as you probably heard that, legal started the session with 6 vacant positions out of 31. So that's a really tough place to be and to try to get everything done. So the other thing that we would add here is that we believe that as this goes along, we will have much better ability to find employees to work for us if they can work in Las Vegas. There's a lot more diversity in just people who can apply. So this is one of those times, and I perceive in the Legislative Council Bureau's history where we've increased the number of employees, and again, I don't think we've ever experienced anything in the Council Bureau like COVID, which really caused us to have a quick input of needs for employees. But I think, I'm not sure if I answered your question. I wasn't.
So, again, just sort of looking at the numbers, we started out looking at 120,000 square feet in the next 5 years, and then we moved to almost 200,000. It's 198,000 square feet between these buildings. And when you look at the core proposal, it's 31 staff. It's 31 LCB staff plus, again, running the buildings. And so I guess the question becomes, do we need to own or control 3 buildings, or do we need to just leave space for the folks that work for us, and then look at maybe adding some hearing rooms? And I know we did a little bit more in depth for the hearing room building, which I think is MC 18 maybe, but we're looking at like 9 hearing rooms over 58,000 square feet. And I know this building has 11. We typically run as many as 3 hearings at a time. So even if you double that, you're at 6. So it seems like we're really making an enormous leap here that an expensive leap, both when you look at the cost of the buildings, 100 million plus parking garages of 32 million. And then when you look at about 16.5 million more per year operating related to the staff to operate those buildings. And I, you know, and when I say I agree, I think there's a strong hiring pool in Las Vegas, and to have some of our staff located down there makes some sense because we'll have better luck perhaps in legal and fiscal and so forth. So I'm not arguing against that. It's just how do we do it, and how do we, you know, how do we tell the taxpayers that we're spending $120 million on these buildings and another $16.5 million annually, and again, going from 302 employees to 469 total, and an operating cost of 37.7 per year. That's the current 37.7 per year to 64.7 per year, which is a 71% increase. So I think it's a stretch, and I don't know how to explain it. Again, I recognize that we could use some offices down south. I recognize that conference rooms that we currently have are inadequate. So maybe we leave some space for employees, and we convert one building to a hearing building. That's all. The information we have has been limited, and I think also what's driving part of these numbers, when you look at the tenant improvements, potentially of $700 per square foot. Again, $700 per square foot this has gone from like a long-term project to urgent, and I don't know how we're getting these figures, but the $100 million in tenant improvements is almost the same as what we were thinking we were going to spend for a new building, including everything in it. So thank you.
I'm happy to answer that part if that's okay. We have had the opportunity to consult with the actual contractor who built the buildings and the architect who designed them, in addition to looking at the big picture here, and we believe that we would need to make all this work, we would need that third building in the beginning while we're adding to the main building that we would have. And the reason that the cost is higher for those tenant improvements than in other buildings is that the legislature has a need for confidentiality that's unique, I think, to any other building in the state. And what I mean by that is if you have the Natural Resources Conservation Natural Resources building, those people are usually operating on the same premise from the same director. Here, there are 42 legislators in one house and 21 in the other, and two parties. And honestly, as legislative staff, we treat every individual legislator as unique, and everything that to do with them is confidential unless they share it. So that dictates that we have to have individual offices for all of our professional staff and staff that handles the materials of legislators, and any offices that we provide to legislators are individual offices, and they're built with soundproofing. I don't believe it costs a lot more than normal, but I think the cost here is that we provide individual offices rather than cubicles and things like that, again, to ensure the confidentiality of our documents. The plan that we have submitted would give us the ability to add some extra offices quickly this summer to the third building, if you will, the one that's diamond-shaped. And then we could move in and start. It's really critical to get our new employees, especially in the legal division, attorneys hired right after the bar this summer so that they can be useful in the next legislative session. The training in there is quite time-consuming. So those employees and to the extent that it applies to the research division and the audit division, the same thing applies. We'd like to get them down there and get it going. So we would move them into that building, as well as our plan would be to move the people who are in the Sedway office building into that building as well, while the other one is being refitted with offices. And we would leave the two tenants in there, which is cannabis and taxation. And once, again, I just, from what I'm seeing, my best advice to you is that you will continue to grow, and that having that building to grow into might be really important to you in the future, because as I see it, the rest of these buildings are going to get developed and filled up, and you're not going to have room to grow that's near the building that you're in, which is important for good staffing through the legislature. But that's sort of why we formulated the plan in this way.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will call on Speaker Yeager.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And obviously, would just note, we just sat through approval of planning for what's going to result in about $900 million in requests for construction of executive branch buildings. So I think in comparison to that, we're not talking about a huge amount here, but Ms. Erdos, you and I have had a lot of conversations about this concept as Chair of Leg Commission. I feel like it's my duty to work with you and figure out what the legislature needs. And so, here is my question. Initially, we were talking about building our own building, a separate standalone building that was going to be years in the making and was going to be fairly expensive. And when Mr. Robb came forward with this plan of buying these buildings, which, by the way, we just approved buying of the 18 buildings, with 15 of them to be improved by the executives, so at least indicates to me that there was agreement there that the legislature would be able to have 3 of those buildings. But I do remember in early discussions that there was one building in that complex that would have worked for the legislature. If we were able to obtain that one building, we would have just been able to do it with one building, and I just was hoping you could verify that that was the case. And it was my understanding that the governor was unwilling to give the legislature that building, and that caused us to be in the situation we're in now, to have to look for additional buildings at additional cost.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the record, Brenda Erdos, Legislative Council Bureau, that is the initial plan that we submitted, and what we found then when we were extended the courtesy of looking at other buildings instead, that it just takes more people and more money to keep up 3 buildings versus 1, to staff them. You can have 1 receptionist in a floor or 2 of 1 building, but you can't do that with 3 buildings. And there are just a lot of other costs that come up when you have 3 buildings and 2 parking lots. Again, we are building 2 parking garages. The other building came with a parking garage, so it has very much increased the cost. But we believe that we've come up with a good plan that's solid for the legislature in this manner.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I want to make sure I put on the record, I think the LCB is incredible, and the staff, and how hard you've all worked, and we couldn't function without you, and so want to make sure I thank for that. But I do have to echo my colleagues' sentiments that I think this expansion, it goes far beyond anything ever imagined, and we started with smaller square footage, and I do believe we need committee hearing rooms. I believe we should have some offices for legislators, but I don't believe every legislator needs a private office. When we're here in legislation, during the session, everybody must have their own office because we're here daily, but I still believe we could come up with some mix of open offices that various legislators can use, because I never envision a time in the South where all 63 legislators will be in the office at the same time. And so I think we have to look at efficiencies with our tax dollars in there. So I support some things, some open offices, committee rooms. I believe we need a good space for our employees in the South, but not to this far expansion. So I'll have to be a no on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Canizaro, did you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Erdos, I just wanted to know if you can verify this. As I understand it, this plan is not 63 individual offices. There would be a chunk of offices. There would also be shared office space that folks could use, conference rooms, staff offices, room for security and IT, and then, of course, hearing rooms so that we can continue to accommodate both during session and outside of session in the interim, being able to have folks participate in the legislative process from Las Vegas when they're not able to make it up to Carson City for testimony and to attend hearings.
Yes, I can confirm that. We don't have 63 offices available. I mean, we are building around 40 right now, but any that are not claimed would be filled by staff until they were claimed. But we also have in our, and again, these plans aren't final, but what we have right now is 3 offices on 2 different floors, so 6 offices that would be available for legislators, staff, and anyone else that's, for example, traveling from Carson City down to a committee hearing, or for whatever reason would want to do the sort of hotel style, make a reservation for that office, and they would be that would be held for them. So there would be some vacant offices for people to, but I think at least the total number we have right now is 6 throughout there. We also have a lot more conference rooms than you would have in a normal just office building, because of the nature of the business that we experience in working with legislators. So many things that so much of the work is done in small or large conference rooms, and so that we have more conference rooms than normal also.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'll call for a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the subcommittee recommend approval of the Legislative Branch Capital Improvement Program as presented by Director Erdos, which includes $217.1 million in CIP projects as detailed on the handout from Director Erdos. This motion does not include the $1.1 million one-shot appropriation request, which will be considered at a later date as part of the LCB one-shot bill. I also move to direct fiscal staff to bring a recommendation for the full committees when the legislative branch CIP is closed in full committee of how the $217.1 million could be split between general fund appropriations and financing through the issuance of general obligation bonds.
Thank you very much. Assemblywoman Bacchus, a second from Senator Canizaro. Any discussion? Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Oh, Speaker Yeager, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be quick. I think I kind of know where this is going to land, but I just wanted to remind folks that 80% of the population lives in Las Vegas. We are not in 1864 any longer. We've never had our own building in the South. We've always had to rent space from the executive, and to be candid, rent space in a building that's falling apart, and I think does a disservice to the legislative branch. We are the branch of government that is closest to the people, and I think we do a real disservice with not providing access to those voters, one, to us, and also to be able to attend the hearings. I mean, we sometimes stream a hearing to Grant Sawyer, and there's a table with 2 chairs, and you can't even see who's in the audience, and that's if we have the ability to get that room. Sometimes it's phone only, so I think it's time we grow up as a state. It's time we ask for what the legislature rightfully deserves, because this is going to result in good government, and it's going to result in our voters being able to be more active in the legislative process and interact with us. And again, I want to remind folks that there was one building that would have worked there, and this process is about compromise. The governor didn't want to give up that building to the legislature, and so we had to come up with a second option, and one that Ms. Erdos and Mr. Robb worked very hard on coming up with. That's what we have in front of us. I think it's high time we do this, and so would urge my colleagues to support the motion.
Thank you very much, sir. And with that, Assemblyman P.K. O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. And I want to agree, there is 80% of the population. Our LCB staff is tremendous, the work they're doing. But I also want to say, as our speaker emphasized, we're the people's representatives, but we're also a part-time legislature. And we must keep that in mind, I think. And some of this expansion is appropriate, is necessary. The committee rooms, I'm even looking up at the TV now where there's poles blocking people's view. We can't tell if people are in there or not. So I agree with some of the committee room part. I agree with some of this, but the total expansion I have problems with, particularly as we get back to we're a part-time citizen legislature, not a full-time legislature, and that's what I'm hearing with the expansion of 40 some odd offices for everybody. I have no need for an office in Vegas. Thank you, Chair.
Majority Leader Canizaro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm obviously supportive of the motion. I seconded it. First, I would note that while we are in fact a part-time legislature, we still have constituents who reach out to us and we don't email them. And I certainly hope that no one is emailing their constituents saying, I'm not sitting in Carson City, so I am completely unable to help you. None of us do that. That is not the job that we signed up for. It's not the job our constituents elected us to. Additionally, in the interim, this last interim, I sat on the Legislative Commission, the Interim Finance Committee, the Sentencing Commission, which is an executive-based commission out of the executive branch as a member of that commission. Those all meet in our hearing rooms. Those happen throughout the interim. For the year and a half that we are not sitting in Carson City, those rooms down in Las Vegas are utilized for a variety of interim committees, for a variety of other commissions and committees that need hearing space to meet so that the public can attend and give public comment. Many of us participate in a lot of those. Some of those are done, and we are not members of them, but they use our committee rooms for that. Additionally, our LCB staff works year-round. They do not just show up for 120 days in this building and expect to get everything done. Yes, there are session staff that are hired, but we also have legal staff and research staff and constituent services units and our fiscal staff and administrative staff that are all working during the interim to conduct audits, to prepare our interim committees, to codify the NRS that we have all passed during the legislative session. So the idea that because we are a part-time legislature, we just should not have any space for all of those employees to meet, that we shouldn't be able to do recruitment in the Las Vegas area for additional staff so that we can make sure that when we come up here, we can have bills drafted, that there's enough support, is doing a disservice to the people that we represent. Again, I would remind everyone here, there was a proposal for one building. That was not agreed to. What we have approved are 3 buildings. We also just approved 15 executive branch buildings with improvements, with ongoing costs, for years to come, so that we can all be on one campus, so that we can all be more effective. This is part and parcel of that. The legislature is an equal but separate branch of government. We deserve to be able to provide the services that our constituents need, and we do while we are only a part-time legislature, which, by the way, cannot change just because there is office space in Las Vegas. That is constitutional. We also have obligations, and I am sure that if every one of you took a look at your emails, your phones, your text messages, your social media, your constituents contact you outside of this 120 days to ask for assistance, to ask for help, to work on legislation for the next legislative session. We need the ability to be able to do that as well, because that is also part and parcel of this job. So, Madam Chair, I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you very much. Senator Gansert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to make it clear that we agree that we want to make sure that we're accessible to our constituents and that we do need some space down south. And the original proposal was for about 30 staff moving south. And to completely recognize that we need to have some spaces for members of the Senate and the Assembly to be able to work with their constituents, and also through conference rooms and maybe some offices. But what we have before us is sort of a question of how much space do we need and how much does it cost? And we've gone from a much lower level, maybe 120,000 square feet, to almost 200,000 feet, and then the cost. And I just want to point out a couple of things. We employ a little under 400 people, and there's 63 of us, so let's just round up to 500 versus the thousands and thousands of employees that the state has. And then so there's a difference in our needs, given that we have a limited number and we are part-time, recognizing staff is not part-time and recognizing that we have peaks and valleys in our work. But also, the tenant improvements, one of the reasons I brought that up is that one of the items we approved today, which was in our packet, was for tenant improvements and signs and things like that for the other 15 buildings. The total for the other 15 buildings was $74.5 million. After we bought those buildings. So I think we just say that we end up having these buildings. I think we really need to proceed carefully and make sure that we get appropriate bids so that we're not paying over $700 per square foot for tenant improvements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with a lot of things that our colleagues have said today. I had the opportunity to tour the buildings with a few of the members sitting on this committee. And in touring the buildings, we found the one building that could accommodate all of our needs. And that building would have had much lower TIs, as you've seen and approved in this budget. The 18 buildings that we approved wouldn't have happened had the legislature not said that they would agree to the 3 buildings that we were forced to take because our governor refused to allow the legislature to use the one building that could accommodate all of our needs in one building. So then therefore we had to go to a backup plan. That's why we have the 3 buildings that are in this budget. I've been in this body for now 4 sessions, and I've heard time and time again of legislations that have come out, comments that have come out. When you look at the diversity of the staff of the state of Nevada, we've complained about that. But we've had a hard time hiring diverse staff to work here in Carson City. We have the ability to not just fill current vacancies that LCB has, but to fill those current vacancies with maybe more of a diverse capacity, by diverse staffing, by being in Southern Nevada. Will we use the office buildings, the office space? Yes, we will. Well, one of my colleagues said we must remember that we are a part-time legislature. I would disagree with that. We're a part-time in session legislature every other year for 120 days. But the work of a legislator, if you're doing your job, is 24/7, 365 days a year. At least that's been my experience. They lied to me when they said this was a part-time job. It is not. It is not. We meet with constituents in our districts, but we also meet with constituents about legislation for the impending legislature. We also have tons and tons of interim committee meetings that, again, no one ever told me that. Y'all lied to me when I decided I wanted to run initially. There is a lot of work that goes on in the interim. This is a full-time job. So if anyone's out there watching us and thinking about running, I'm going to let you know this is a full-time commitment to the constituents that we represent. And it's not just the constituents in your district that elect you. It is every member of this state that we represent. So, could this have been less expensive? It sure could have been. Had we gotten the one building that had an attached garage and a building next door that could have accommodated, in my opinion, the needs of the executive branch that the governor wanted. However, that was not what he would agree to, so we had to go to Plan B. Plan B is these 3 buildings. I would much more prefer to be in the one building with the parking garage that was attached. But since that was not what our governor would agree to, this is the Plan B. This is what we need for this legislature as we grow up as a state, as someone else on this, my colleague said. 80% of the population is down south. The majority of our elected officials are down south. If we are truly going to address the needs of our constituents, and as the state grows, we need the building down south. We couldn't get one, so we're stuck with the 3, and we're going to have to step up and do what we have to do the tenant improvements so that this, what some people say, part-time legislature that does full-time work, has a space to do the work of the people. And for that reason, Madam Chair, I will be voting in favor.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman. I concur. And with that, I will call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Nay. Okay, on the record, Senator Titus, Assemblywoman Kasama, Assemblyman O'Neill, and Senator Gansert. The motion passes. And with that, Ms. Erdos, I would like to publicly thank you and your staff for all you do for us during session, out of session, at night, in the morning, and every time we call you. So thank you. And with that, we will go to the final item on our agenda, which is public comment. And we will start here in Carson City. If anyone has public comment, you may come forward. I do not see anybody, including behind the pole in Las Vegas. We will go to the phone lines, BPS. If anybody is waiting on the phone lines, the number is listed on the agenda. And BPS, is there anyone waiting on the phone lines?
The public line is open and working.
Well, there's some good indication we need some
The
help.
public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you very, very much. And with that, all of you, please have a nice day. And we will see you tomorrow morning. If I can turn off the mic button.